Hi, beautiful people. How are ya? I hope you're having a great day. Bacterial and viral infections have been documented to cause immune dysregulation, as well as instigating clinical symptoms of fibromyalgia, such as fatigue. And the connection between fibromyalgia and Epstein-Barr virus has been documented. The Epstein-Barr virus becomes latent or inactive in your body when you get the infection, if your immune system is strong. The virus gets reactivated when your immune system is weakened, leading to chronic symptoms like pain and fatigue, characteristics of fibromyalgia. Over 90% of all humans have been infected with EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, in their lifetime. Most adults will show antibodies to EBV from infection years earlier. High or elevated antibody levels may be present for years and are not diagnostic of recent infection. The antibodies, VCA and EBNA, suggest past infection from several months to years earlier. So today, I'd like to discuss Epstein-Barr virus and fibromyalgia, along with ME CFS, according to research. And I'd love to hear what you all think. Here we go. Epstein-Barr virus, also known as human herpes virus 4, is a gamma herpes virus that occurs only in humans. Laboratory testing can help distinguish whether someone is susceptible to EBV infection or has had a recent or past infection. Most people in the U.S. have been infected with EBV at some point in their life. It's very contagious and easily passed from person to person. It's present in the saliva of infected individuals and can be spread through close contact, such as kissing, and through sharing utensils or cups. According to the CDC, this is the normal testing procedure for EBV. There are basically different blood tests at different stages of the virus. There's the initial exposure and acute or active phase that lasts 2 to 4 weeks, and you will feel the worst during this stage. Then the latent or inactive phase of EBV, which remains in the person's body for the rest of their lives and may reactivate, but usually causes few problems unless the person's immune system is significantly weakened. I would say the EBV nuclear antigen, or EBNA, would be the antibody test that we would need to get if we believe we've had a previous infection. People with mono can be diagnosed by their symptoms and from blood work, a complete blood count, or CBC, and a mono test, which tests for a heterophile antibody. But 25% of individuals with mono do not produce heterophile antibodies and will have a negative mono test, especially children. In adults, it can be a false negative in 25% of individuals the first week of illness. However, a heterophile antibody test is the best initial test for diagnosis of EBV infection, with 71 to 91% accuracy. You can pass mono on to other people up to 18 months after symptoms have cleared. Most people are infected by EBV in childhood and experience few or no symptoms. However, if the initial infection occurs during adolescence, it can cause infectious mononucleosis, commonly called mono, a condition associated with fatigue, fever, sore throat, swollen lymph nodes, an enlarged spleen, and sometimes an enlarged liver. About 25% of infected teens and young adults have these symptoms, and usually the symptoms resolve within a month or two. Because the name kissing disease is associated with EBV and mono, kids are stigmatized at a young age. I remember kids teasing one young person when I was in middle school who got mono. She was out of school for a couple of months, and I felt sorry for her. Have you had a friend or knew someone who had mono when they were a teen? Were you that young person? And I certainly didn't think a thing about drinking from someone else's cup. That's something I'm a bit paranoid about today. Just ask my grandkids. But mono can have other causes than EBV. So there's that too, like hepatitis A, B, and C, and rubella. The incubation period for EBV infection is 32 to 49 days when the patient is contagious. Viral replication is first detected in the oral cavity, and sometimes it can be important to distinguish EBV from other illnesses like hepatitis. It can also be important to rule out EBV infection and to look for other causes of the symptoms. Those with strep throat, an infection caused by group A streptococcus, for instance, needs to be identified and treated with antibiotics. A person may have strep throat instead of mono, or may have both conditions at the same time. It should be noted that 90% of adults worldwide are seropositive for EBV antibodies by 35 years of age. Mono usually occurs in teenage years. Up to 98% of all patients with mono present with sore throat, lymphadenopathy, inflammation and swelling of the lymph nodes, fever, fatigue, and tonsillar enlargement. Quote, in fact, a patient between 16 and 25 years old who complains of sore throat and fever is more likely to have infectious mononucleosis than another disease. And if, in addition, he or she is jaundiced, a diagnosis of infectious mononucleosis is almost certain, unquote. That was from 1975. Well, that certainly makes me wonder. I got severely sick when I was 24, around that age. I had the worst sore throat and fever I'd ever had. I could barely move and was feeling almost delusional. When my mother-in-law took my temperature, it was 105. So my mom came and took me to the ER or the doctor's office. Honestly, don't remember because I was so sick. It was Sunday, so it was probably the ER. My husband went to church with our son, who was only a couple years old. I mean, he wasn't going to miss church just because I was sick, y'all. I was really scared because I had never been that sick before. At the ER, I was told I had strep throat, and they gave me antibiotics for it. And I know I was sick for at least a week. My mom stayed at our house and took care of me and my son while my husband worked until my fever broke enough that I could get up and move around. So, could I have had EBV alongside strep throat? I don't know. It's possible. I doubt they checked me for it. Then, in my early 30s or late 20s, I got strep throat again. At that time, I wasn't quite as sick. I had a fever and severe sore throat, but I didn't feel like I was slipping out of this world like I did the first time I had it. EBV does not respond to antibiotics, but people start feeling better after 2 to 4 weeks. Reports in the literature and hospital records were reviewed to determine the activity of EBV in the elderly. Epidemiologic surveys demonstrated that 90 to 97% of adults more than 60 years old were seropositive for EBV. That's just crazy to me. Honestly, I had no idea. I found this very interesting. Mono is not a common occurrence in the elderly. When it does occur, they're more likely to be jaundice and less likely to have swollen lymph nodes, a sore throat, or an enlarged spleen. The Hoagland criteria is often used to diagnose mono. This includes greater than 50% lymphocytes and 10% atypical lymphocytes in the presence of fever, pharyngitis, and adenopathy with confirmed serologic testing. Normal lymph nodes are approximately the size of a pea. When they meet foreign substances in lymphatic fluid, they may swell. They can grow significantly, sometimes as big as a tennis ball. Whew. And if a sore throat is present, the following are also more likely to be found on physical examination if the patient has a positive heterophile test result for infectious mononucleosis. Palatal petechia is bruising on the soft palate of a person's mouth. It can show up with EBV, mono, or strep throat, and also with COVID-19. Regular pharyngitis or sore throat can also lead to this condition, and tonsillitis, which is inflammation of the tonsils as well. And there's a common virus called CMV, cytomegalovirus, I'm guessing, and that also remains in the body for life, but rarely causes problems in healthy people. And then there's posterior cervical lymphadenopathy. These lymph nodes are a group of glands located behind the neck or in the cervical region of the spine. As part of the immune system, the glands contain scavenging white blood cells that fight off infections. Pharyngitis, EBV, mono, and periodontitis are common infectious causes of posterior cervical lymph node swelling. But autoimmune causes are also known to cause this, like RA and systemic lupus, or SLE. Axillary lymphadenopathy is a swelling of the lymph nodes. You might have a visible armpit lump or lymph nodes growing, bumps around the armpit area that are changing shape, pain or tingling sensations, and fever or chills. EBV and mono can cause this lymph node swelling in the axillary. Inguinal lymphadenopathy is when the lymph nodes deep within the groin swell. There are 10 inguinal lymph nodes near the upper thigh in each leg. This type of node gets swollen when there is an injury or skin infection in the leg, like athlete's foot or UTI, and a Pap test checks the cervix for abnormal cells and for HPV. But it's also known that EBV can cause these lymph nodes to swell. So why do I share this? I mention all of this because perhaps you can look back and remember having any of those issues. I do remember having swollen what may have been lymph glands under my armpit, but I never had it checked. Maybe you weren't too concerned like me, but maybe it was EBV, because not everyone with EBV will get very, very sick or fatigue at that time. But mono has been associated with an increased risk of autoimmune diseases like MS, SLE, RA, IBD, and type 1 diabetes, as well as juvenile idiopathic arthritis and celiac disease. The virus is believed to switch on certain genes that are more likely to develop one of those diseases. Finally, let's discuss the EBV infection and fibromyalgia. It's now believed that fibro can be a post-infectious disorder after the onset of a viral attack, an infection, or a parasitic infection. In 2007, a large cohort of individuals with Giardia lamblia, a microscopic parasite that causes giardiasis, I forget how that's pronounced, was tracked over 10 years. The prevalence of fibromyalgia after 10 years of the giardiasis infection was 8.6% compared to 3.1% in controls. That's almost triple the number. It was the most consistently followed cohort of post-infectious patients, and 80% of them also got IBS, and 69% of them got chronic fatigue. 5% of them had all three, compared to only 0.4% of the control group. It's believed that pathogen triggers such as mono cause ME CFS, and post-infectious fibro develops after long COVID. So there is a strong immune component in both. But in that study, the odds of a participant getting fibro after getting giardiasis was 4.8 times higher than the control group. And if they had IBS, their odds of getting fibro was 6.27 times higher than the control group. It's just nice that there is documentation of these immune problems that develop fibromyalgia. In a 2015 study with 21 men and women with fibromyalgia, all the participants had elevated IgG antibodies to Epstein-Barr virus. Antibody levels were 5 to 10 times higher than normal in 76% of the participants. 14% had 2 to 4 times higher increase in antibody levels. It is this hidden activity that is thought to trigger immune system dysfunction and create some of the fatigue and pain seen in fibromyalgia patients. They also found that lower concentrations of adrenaline, a neurotransmitter, in 62% with fibro, and higher levels of IgG, EBV, ABS. There were decreased levels of noradrenaline in 71.4% and adrenaline in 62% of patients with fibro, while other patients had normal levels of plasma adrenaline levels. Low serotonin levels were found in 52.4% of patients, which may relate to poor sleep patterns in fibro patients. Quote, our data show that the patients with a lower threshold of pain and were with higher serum levels of IgG-ABS, as the serum levels in antiviral IgG-ABS against EBV were related to pain intensity and were associated with some fibromyalgia clinical features. The results support the idea that the induced immune response to some infectious agents like EBV or CMV can participate in the pathogenesis of fibromyalgia, unquote. Epstein-Barr and fibromyalgia may occur because of an old infection that becomes active, leading to a rise in antibodies and detected in patients with fibro who have symptoms of pain and fatigue. Quote, the Epstein-Barr virus becomes latent or inactive in your body when you get the infection if your immune system is strong. The virus gets reactivated when your immune system is weakened, leading to chronic symptoms such as pain and fatigue, characteristic of fibromyalgia, unquote. That was Dr. Lamb coaching. I mean, in a healthy individual, B and T cells remember the virus from when the patient first got it. And when it tries to reactivate, they assemble an array of antibodies to keep EBV in check. But if the body's immune system isn't working well, it could theoretically allow the virus to gain a foothold at levels that once again make you sick. In a study on chronic fatigue syndrome in 2014, it was found that there was deficient EBV-specific B and T cells memory response in 76% of CFS patients, so reactivation occurred. There were 400 participants in that study. That's quite a large percentage to be at 76%. And then in another study in 2020, researchers found that 24% of people with ME/CFS tested positive for EBV, compared to only 4% of healthy people. So to recap, these antibodies will show up in blood work from a past infection. The virus lurks in the body waiting to attack. An exposure of the body to a major stressor leads to a stress response in the body. Alterations of the HPA hormone axis and the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, in fibromyalgia have been shown in studies. The levels of antibodies against Epstein-Barr virus have been shown to be raised in fibro with severe fatigue and higher pain intensity. The only treatment plan is to lower stress, eliminate inflammatory foods, get increased amounts of sleep, be active as much as possible. Various vitamins, minerals, and nutrients may be needed, but it's different for each person. And getting tested for EBV may provide insight to our symptoms. I will mention what Dr. Teitelbaum says here in a moment. An antigen is a substance that your immune system doesn't recognize. Your immune system makes antibodies in response to antigens to fight them. Your doctor can check for antibodies to the following EBV antigens in your blood. Once you get your test results, talk to your doctor. Most likely a past infection occurred years ago, and the EBV nuclear antigen, or EBNA, is the way to go. most adults have these antibodies because over 90% of adults have been infected sometime in their lifetime. You can have high levels of antibodies for years, and that doesn't mean you have an active infection. So, is this another piece of the puzzle? Maybe for some of us. Perhaps some of the medications used today for EBV would be helpful, like aldactone, but there are complications, according to Dr. Teitelbaum. It can lower an already low testosterone level, and it can cause dehydration. So these are things to talk to your doctor about. So I hope you learned something. I send you gentle hugs and support. Love you.
With you, I can be sad with you.
And they gave me antibiotic. Seroepidemial are common infections. Is when the lymph that causes GRD from when.
With you, I love the way that you love me today. Let's run.